Hello geeks, welcome to our tech room. In this video, I'll be explaining you some of processor terminology and how to check mobile processor version, type, number of cores, performance, brand information in a simple and easy way. So, without delay, let's start. As we know that processor is one of the important part of any electronics device, the performance of the processor directly impact any application that you run on your mobile phone, like good functionality of the camera, high intensive graphics based game require good processor. Big name in the field of smartphone processor are Qualcomm, developing Snapdragon series, Samsung, developing Exynos series, Y, developing Kirin series, High Silicon series, MediaTek, developing Helio, and other brand like Apple, developing A series, and NVDIA. Today's smartphone technology uses SoC technology, which stand for System on Chip. In this SoC technology, most complex multiple processing part like CPU, central processing unit, GPU, graphics processor unit, IPU, image processing unit, DSP, digital signal processing, memory, neural processing unit, video audio encoder, modems are all integrated into a single chip and are soldered into the main board. SoC technology saves space, cost, and power consumption. Because of the small size of mobile phone, most of the part are integrated in a single chip. But this technology cannot be used in laptop and computer because of lack of flexibility. Like if you want to change CPU, RAM or modem, then you can't do it in SoC. So the laptop do not use SoC and each component in the laptop and computer as a separate module. Terminology number one, brand of the processor. Leading processor brands in the market are Qualcomm, Samsung, Huawei, MediaTek, High Silicon, Apple, etc. According to the Statista report of the second quarter of 2020, Qualcomm has the highest market share of 32%, followed by Silicon with 22% and Apple by 19%. So we can say currently Qualcomm Snapdragon brand is popular. Now let's look at a second terminology, that is architecture of the processor. Currently Android support three processor architecture. ARM stands for Advanced RISC Machine, Intel, and MIPS. Among them, the best processor architecture is ARM. ARM-based architecture is developed by Samsung Electronics System. So we conclude in a processor architecture, ARM is best. Processor size. Today's smartphone processors are defined in nanometer (nm). Currently, high in general processor size in the market is using 7 nm technology. Also, there are some high performance processor using 5 nm technology, and they are A14 Bionic chip, Snapdragon 888, Exynos 1080. For the same processor area is smaller the nanometer value, more the transaction can adjust on it than the processor with a larger nanometer value. So more tasks can be performed in a given time frame in a processor which uses smaller nanometer value. Here we can see two processors from Apple, one A10 with 16 nm processor size and A12 with 7 nm processor. In 7 nm processor, 6.9 billion transistor can be adjusted, and in 16 nm processor, 3.3 billion transistor. So from here we can clearly see in the same area more number of transistor can be adjusted in a small uh, nanometer value processor. So the small nanometer value processor are faster and more efficient, and the processor with a higher nanometer value is slower and less power efficient. Multi-core. Mobile phone in the market have a single core processor, dual core processor, quad core processor, octa core processor. Single core processor has one core, dual core has two, quad has three, and quad has 4 and octa has 8. Higher the core value, better the processor performance. Currently popular smartphone has octa-core processor. So before buying phone, focus on number of core it is providing. Clock speed. Faster the clock of the CPU, the more instruction CPU can execute per second. So we can say higher the CPU clock speed, faster the phone. Today, fastest processor have clock speed ranges from 1.8 GHz to 2.8 GHz. But Qualcomm has officially announced that Qualcomm Snapdragon 365 Plus 5G has peak clock speed of 3.1 GHz. So, before buying a mobile phone, focus on this range as well. Next, we have cache memory size. Cache memory is a high speed memory device which exists between CPU and RAM. It acts like a buffer. Cache memory holds the data that CPU needs frequently. And if CPU need those data, then it will request first from cache memory. And if it is present in a cache memory, then processor or CPU will take it and process it. And suppose if the CPU requests data from cache memory, and if there is no data in a cache memory, then CPU requests it from RAM, and RAM provide those data. And the size of the cache memory will be in megabyte. Bigger the cache memory size, better the processor performance. Have a cache memory of 3 MB to 8 MB. Apple A14 Bionic processor has 8 MB of L3 cache memory. Go to Play Store. In the source bar, type CPU Z, install it, and then open the application. Here you can see interface. It has SoC system on chip that I have explained earlier, device, system, battery, and many more. Now let's focus on SoC. Point 1, model. This smartphone is using Qualcomm technology. As we have discussed earlier, Qualcomm is one of the most popular brand of processor. Next is core. This smartphone has 8 core processor. Also current smartphone is having 8 core processor in the market. Next is architecture. This smartphone is using Cardio 470 architecture. Cardio 470 is a series of custom built ARM architecture. As we have discussed earlier, ARM architecture is most used architecture for the processor. Next is processor size. This smartphone is using 8nm technology. Current smartphone uses 8nm technology. However, uh, we also have 5nm technology based processor in the market like A14 Bionic processor from Apple, Snapdragon 888 from Qualcomm. Next is CPU clock. This smartphone clock speed ranges from 300 MHz to 2.21 GHz. Here we have 8 core processor as we can see here, and those 8 core processor are CPU 0 to CPU 7, and the respective frequency or we can say clock speed are shown here. Next is GPU vendor. GPU for this smartphone is provided by Qualcomm. GPU renderer is Adreno 618 with a frequency of 700 MHz. Actually, Adreno 618 is for upper range smartphone. Along with SoC, you can also see device, system, battery, sensor info of your smartphone. Thank you for watching.